Episode 5. The words swam for a second, then locked into focus. It was all couched in polite language. My name is in all the articles next to yours." He swallowed. "You're leaving," he said. Leaving the safe, polite distance of strangers. "I stepped down," he said, "from the CEO role." "I know," she said. "Mark called Ethan. Ethan told me." He blinked. "Mark called Ethan?" he repeated. "Employees have a right to know who's running the company," she said. "And apparently, so do their kids." He let that go. "It's temporary," he said. "On paper." "On paper," she echoed. "Isn't that the place where everything looks nicer than it really is?" He flinched. "Laura," he said, "I know I've—" She held up a hand. "I don't want another half apology," she said. "I don't want. I made mistakes, but, and you have to understand." I understand enough. I understand there was at least one hotel, at least one photo, at least one younger woman who got very close to a man who used to come home smelling like concrete dust and cheap coffee. He swallowed. Do you want me to say it? He asked. Out loud? Yes, she said. Not for me. For you. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. I crossed the line with Emily, he said. More than once. On trips. At other times. It felt like tearing something out of his chest. And with Harborline? She asked quietly. Did you cross lines there too? Yes, he said. I looked the other way on things I shouldn't have. I told myself it was to protect us, to grow what we had. But I was also chasing something. Pride, fear. I don't know. She nodded. Once. Thank you, she said, for finally saying it like that. He watched her face, searching for the fury he deserved. It wasn't there. Just a deep, tired grief. I can work on it, he said. On me. On us. I can go to counseling. I can walk away from Harborline. I can... Stop, she said softly. He stopped. I believe you're sorry, she said. I even believe that part of you wants to do better. But right now, what I feel every time I look at you is not safe. It's not home. He felt something inside him crack. So what do you want? He asked. I want a separation, she said. Time. Space. A clear line where I don't have to share a bed or a bathroom with a man I don't recognize. He swallowed hard. You're asking me to move out, he said. Yes, she replied. To an apartment, a hotel, your office couch. I don't care where, but not here, not with us, not until I can stand in the same room as you without hearing that news anchor's voice in my head. He leaned forward. What about Ethan? Chloe? He asked. What do I tell them? The truth, she said. That their parents are taking a break. That their father needs to figure out who he is away from the title and the affairs and the deals. That their mother needs to remember who she is without constantly bracing for impact. Laura, he said. Please. She met his eyes. I'm not closing the door forever, she said. I'm just closing it for now, on this version of us. He felt tears sting his eyes before he could stop them. He hadn't cried when the board took his title. He hadn't cried when the photo hit the news. He cried now. I never wanted to hurt you, he said. I know, she said. That's what makes it worse. If you'd been a pure villain, it would be easier to walk away. He laughed through the tears, a broken sound. I'll pack a bag, he said. She nodded. He stood, moving like someone carrying weight strapped to his body. At the stairs, he turned. What about the kids? He asked. Do you want me to tell them now? They already know more than you think, Laura said. But yes, tell them. Don't disappear and leave me to explain it alone. He nodded again and climbed the stairs. He chose the smallest suitcase in the closet. It felt symbolic. He threw in clothes without thinking much about it. Shirts, pants, a tie he probably wouldn't need for a while. He paused over a framed family photo on his nightstand, then left it. Downstairs, Ethan and Chloe waited like people bracing for a storm warning. I'm going to stay somewhere else for a while, Richard said. They didn't look surprised. How long? Ethan asked. I don't know, Richard replied. Your mom and I need time. Is this because of her? Chloe asked. And Harborline? And all of that? It's because of me, he said. Because of my choices. Don't put that on anyone else. Chloe's eyes filled. but she didn't let the tears fall. "Are you coming to my graduation?" she asked, voice thin. "Yes," he said immediately. "Of course, that's months away." "Things change fast around here," she muttered. Ethan stepped forward. "Dad," he said, "I'm not going to pretend I'm okay with everything. I'm not. But I'm not out of your life either. I just need some distance. Like Mom." Richard nodded, throat tight. "I understand," he said. He hugged them both. Chloe was stiff for a second, then clung to him hard, her face pressed into his chest. Ethan's hug was brief, solid. Then he picked up the suitcase and walked out the door. It was raining again. Of course it was. He loaded the bag into the car, got in, and sat there for a minute, hands on the steering wheel, watching water bead on the windshield. The house in the rearview mirror looked exactly the same as it had every other day. He started the engine and pulled away. Free fall. The apartment he found was a furnished corporate rental downtown. 2 rooms, neutral colors, generic art on the walls. The kind of place designed for people in transition. He dropped his suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. The room smelled like cleaning products and air freshener. On the bedside table, someone had left a small welcome card. "We hope your stay is comfortable." He almost laughed. At Thompson Development, the new era began quietly. Mark moved into the CEO office with no ceremony. The name on the door stayed the same for now. Richard's parking spot didn't. Employees adjusted. They still said Richard by accident in meetings, then corrected themselves. "The CEO, Mark thinks, do we need Richard's sign-off? Sorry. Old habit." The Harbor Line deal slowed to a crawl under independent review. Some people relaxed, relieved the brakes had been slammed. Others looked nervous, wondering what would happen if the deal fell through and the company had to tighten belts without a cash injection. Emily kept her head down and her work immaculate. She answered every investigator's question calmly. Here, she had warned about a clause. There, she had pushed back. Here, she had modeled worst-case scenarios that had been ignored. It was clear to anyone who looked carefully. She had not been a mindless cheerleader. She had been a participant, a voice, not the only one, not the final one. The whispers about her shifted. They were still sharp, but now there was a thin layer of respect under some of them. She knew what she was doing, someone said. She wasn't just there for the attention. Maybe, someone else replied. But she knew what kind of man she was playing with. People need villains in a story like this. They weren't sure yet who fit the role best. Ethan watched it all from his low-level analyst seat. His father's name was still on the building, on the stationery, on the contracts. But in the daily stand-up meetings, in the project Slack channels, Richard became a ghost. "Run this by Mark. Mark wants an update. Ask Mark if Harbor Line is still on the table." His stomach twisted every time. He ran into Emily only a few times in passing. Once, in the hallway, she slowed. "Ethan," she said. He stopped. "Yeah," he answered. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For all of it," she said. "For the position this puts you in, for the way people talk." He stared at her. "Are you sorry for what you did with him?" he asked. She didn't look away. "I'm sorry for the hurt it caused," she said. "To people who didn't choose it, including you, including your mom. The rest is complicated." He nodded. "Complicated seems to be the theme lately," he said. "If you want me to leave you alone, one manager said in the break room. We wouldn't be in this mess. If he hadn't chased her, someone else added. Coffee, really talking, not pretending. A session in therapy where he remembered how it had felt to sign his first honest contract and realize he could feed his family. A text from Chloe with a photo of a college acceptance letter, captioned, I got in. You're still driving me to move-in day, right? Small anchors. Tiny, fragile handholds on the way down. He didn't know yet where he would land. Courtrooms? A new, smaller company? A job working for someone else? A quiet life on the edge of the city, rebuilding something that wasn't measured in square footage and profit margins? Part 9 of his life was all motion. No answers. Just consequences. The only thing he knew for sure was that the version of himself who had walked into that first hotel room in the rain, thinking he could control the cost of one different night, was gone. Ahead of him was impact. Behind him, in a house that no longer smelled like his cologne, a woman who had once read contracts at their kitchen table was deciding whether she'd be there when the dust settled. And in between, suspended in the space where stories wait to see how they'll end, Richard Thompson kept falling, wondering, for the first time, not how to get back what he'd lost, but whether he deserved to. It took almost a year for the noise to die down. Not completely. Stories like his never vanish. They just move from the front page to the search results. But the headlines faded. The late-night jokes stopped. The photo, blurry, stolen, endlessly shared, stopped being new. What didn't fade were the scars. Those stayed. On the company, on his family, on himself. Thompson Development survived. Barely. The Harbor Line deal died quietly in a short press release. After careful consideration, both parties have decided not to proceed at this time. Behind that sentence was months of back and forth, threat and counter-threat, lawyers billing by the hour. Independent auditors went through everything: contracts, emails, minutes from meetings. They found aggressive risk-taking, some dangerously close calls, a few creative ideas that never quite made it into signed documents. They didn't find anything that would send anyone to prison. That was something. Mark, as interim CEO, made it clear to the board that if they wanted to save the company's reputation, they had to stop chasing shortcuts. "We go back to being boring," he said in a meeting. "Boring keeps us alive." They sold 2 pieces of land they'd been holding for speculation. They backed out of a flashy downtown project that would have made a gorgeous magazine spread and a terrible balance sheet. They focused on steady work: mid-rise apartments, moderate commercial builds, renovations, the kind of projects that didn't make the news. For now, that was enough. Richard watched all of this from a distance. Board calls, email updates, quarterly reports. His name stayed on the company. His control did not. He could have fought harder, hired his own lawyers, sued, threatened to take his story public in a way that would hurt them as much as they'd hurt him. There were nights, in the quiet of the rental apartment, when he wanted to. But every time he started down that path, he saw Ethan's tired face, Chloe's tight jaw, Laura's eyes when she'd said, "I don't feel safe when I look at you." He had already burned enough, so he didn't light that match. Emily left. Her last week at Thompson Development was strangely calm. No scenes, no dramatic exits. People came by her desk to say goodbye, some out of politeness, some out of genuine respect. "You going to something bigger?" a project manager asked. "Just something different," she said. In truth, it was both. The New York firm that hired her handled everything: relocation, signing bonus, an apartment finder. They wanted her eye for risk and her ability to see around corners. They wanted the woman from the headlines, the one whose name, as one senior partner crudely put it, gets attention in rooms. Emily knew that. She took the offer anyway. For the first few weeks, the city swallowed her. Noise, lights, people who didn't care who she was or what she'd done, because everyone there was busy being their own story. Her new office was high, with a view of concrete and glass stretching in every direction. The work was fast, sharp, relentless. She liked it, mostly. Sometimes, late at night, when the floor was empty and the only sounds were the hum of HVAC and the soft click of her keyboard, She'd think of the older man in the smaller city who had once looked at her like she was the only person in the room who understood the weight he was carrying. She'd think of Laura's face when they met at the office door that day. And she'd feel something that wasn't quite regret, but wasn't pride either. She didn't reach out to Richard. He didn't reach out to her. They existed in each other's lives as a closed chapter, a sharp, complicated one. In New York, when people asked about Thompson Development, she would say, "I worked on a big deal there that didn't go through. Learned a lot." It was true, just not the whole truth. Back in the suburb with the stone walkway, the Thompson house changed in small, practical ways. A second car was gone from the driveway more often than not. The coat closet held one less heavy coat. The bathroom sink had fewer bottles lined up on it. Laura did not rush to file for divorce. People expected her to, in a strange way. Some friends sent her the numbers of excellent divorce attorneys. Others forwarded articles about reclaiming your power. She saved the numbers, deleted the articles. "You're stronger than I'd be," one friend said over coffee. "I'm not stronger," Laura replied. "I'm just not done thinking yet." She went to therapy too. Sat on a different couch, across from a different quiet professional, and unpacked the years of late nights, missed dinners, subtle distance long before Emily ever walked into the frame. "At what point did you first feel alone in your marriage?" the therapist asked. Laura thought about a night 10 years earlier when Richard had almost collapsed from stress and she'd called an ambulance while he argued about hospital bills. "Long before the photo," she said. "The affair was the explosion. The gas leak started years before that." She focused on her life. She started substitute teaching again at a local school, then part-time, then more. She remembered what it felt like to be in front of a classroom, eyes on her, not because of who she was married to, but because of what she knew. At home, she moved a few pieces of furniture, not a remodel, just enough to make the rooms feel less like a museum of a life that no longer fit. On some nights, when the house was quiet, she'd take out the printed bio of Emily she'd once tucked away, read it again, and try to imagine the younger woman starting over in some other city. She didn't hate her. She tried, at first, but the hate never stuck. What stuck was a more complex feeling. They were two different women whose lives had collided around the same man and the same gravity of power. They'd both been pulled. They'd both made choices. They'd both paid. Ethan stayed at the company. Against his first instinct, there was a week where he seriously considered quitting, packing a bag, and moving across the country, becoming someone whose last name meant nothing in the room. Instead, he made a different decision. He requested a transfer to a part of the business far from the executive floor. Field operations, site logistics, the dirty, unpolished heart of construction. "Are you sure?" Mark asked. "You're overqualified for that." "I'm overqualified for getting coffee and being the boss's son, too," Ethan said. "I need to understand what we do, not just what goes on in the boardroom." Mark studied him. "You're your father's kid, all right," he said. "The early version, before the ties got too expensive." On the sites, Ethan learned a different language. Concrete pours and rebar, not ROIs and leverage ratios. The men and women there had their own opinions about Richard. "Built this place from nothing," an older foreman said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Got too big for his boots. Fell. Happens. Still paid us on time," another added. "Never missed payroll. That's more than I can say for some of the saints in this business." Ethan listened. He worked. He made mistakes. He fixed them. Slowly, People started seeing him as something other than the CEO's kid. Just Ethan. He went to therapy too, because he was tired of carrying questions alone. "Do you think you'll forgive him?" the therapist asked one day. "I don't know," Ethan said. "Some days I'm angrier about what he did to the company. Other days, I can't believe he did that to Mom. It's all tangled." "You can forgive and still have boundaries," the therapist said. "Those aren't opposites." He thought about that. It became a kind of goal, not to wipe the slate clean, but to stop letting the anger write every story. Chloe left for college. She chose a school 2 states away, not by accident. "I need distance," she told Laura. "Like, actual miles." "Are you sure it's not too far?" Laura asked. "No," Chloe said. "If it had a different time zone, I'd like it even better." On move-in day, Richard drove. Laura insisted. "He's still your father," she told Chloe. "He still gets that day." The car ride was quiet at first. Then, slowly, Chloe started talking. About dorm assignments. About the roommate who seemed nice but had an alarming number of plants. About the classes she was excited for and the ones she was already planning to skip. Richard listened, grateful for every word. At one point, there was a pause. "Do people recognize you?" Chloe asked suddenly. "When you go to meetings now, do they look at you and think, 'That guy from the scandal'?" He considered lying. "Yes," he said. "Sometimes. Not always. Less than before." "Do you hate that?" she asked. "I did," he said. "Now I mostly just accept it. It's part of who I was, who I am. I don't get to choose what people remember." She looked out the window. "I'm scared I'm going to screw up my life too," she said. Different way. Same feeling. Like, what if I'm not as smart as I think? Or I fall for someone who isn't who I thought he was? Or I become the villain in someone else's story? He gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. "You will mess up," he said. She turned to glare at him. "Comforting," she said dryly. "I mean it," he said. "You'll make mistakes. Some small, maybe some big. But you don't become the villain because you fell. You become the villain if you refuse to see what you broke. If you decide everyone else is wrong and you're still the hero no matter what." She studied his face. "Is that what you did?" she asked. "For a long time. Yeah," he said. "It's easier to blame the market. The pressure, the partner, the girl. Harder to say, 'No, I chose this. I walked into that hotel. I signed that clause. I ignored that voice in my head.'" "And now?" she asked. "Now I'm trying to live with the version where I'm not the hero," he said. "Just a person who hurt people and is trying not to keep hurting them." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You should say that to Mom." "I'm trying," he said. "Try harder," she replied. They drove the rest of the way in a softer silence. When they hugged goodbye in front of her dorm, Chloe held on longer than she had planned. "Don't screw up more while I'm gone," she said into his shoulder. "I'll do my best," he said. As for Richard and Laura, there was no sudden reconciliation. No teary airport reunion. No dramatic scene in the rain. Just slow, awkward, difficult conversations. Once a week at first, then more. Sometimes with a therapist present. Sometimes over coffee in a neutral place. They talked about things they'd never talked about even when they'd been fine. About how lonely Laura had felt long before he cheated. About how heavy Richard had felt his own story of provider, like armor he couldn't take off. about the resentment that had grown quietly, like mold in the corners of a room they never fully cleaned. "Do you want a divorce?" he asked her one afternoon, in a small park between their two separate lives. "I wanted one the day I read that article," she said, "and the day I watched the news, and a lot of days after that." "And now?" he asked. She looked at him. "I want peace," she said. "I don't know yet if that includes being married to you again." He accepted that. He didn't push. Not anymore. He focused on becoming someone he could live with, even if she never chose to live with him again. He stopped drinking as much, slept more. He volunteered to guest lecture at a local community college's business class once a semester at the professor's invitation. "This is Richard Thompson," the professor would say. "He built and almost broke a mid-sized development firm. He's here to talk about ethics and risk." He didn't sugarcoat anything. He told them about profit margins and market cycles. He also told them about the first time he ignored the knot in his stomach and signed something because he didn't want to lose a deal. He never mentioned Emily by name. But he did say, more than once, "Be very careful when you start telling yourself you're the exception. That the rules that apply to weaker people don't apply to you. That's when you're most dangerous." Some students nodded, taking notes. Some smirked, thinking it wouldn't be them. He recognized the smirk. He'd worn it once. A year and a half after the photo, the company sent out a brief internal memo. "The board is pleased to announce that Richard Thompson will return to an advisory role within Thompson Development, focusing on community partnerships and long-term vision. Daily operations will remain under the leadership of CEO Mark Jensen." It wasn't a triumphant comeback. It wasn't exile either. It was something in between. Richard read the memo on his phone, sitting at the small kitchen table in his still temporary apartment, and felt strange. Not victorious. Not humiliated. Just grateful that there was still a place where his experience meant something, even if it wasn't the corner office anymore. He told Laura about it over coffee. She nodded. "That suits you better anyway," she said. "Big picture, not daily fires. You always hated when I tried to fix every little thing myself," he said. "I hated watching you kill yourself doing it," she replied. "This way, maybe you'll live long enough to be annoying at your grandkids' birthdays." He smiled. "Is that an official long-term plan?" he asked. "It's a scenario we can model," she said. Her words were light. Underneath them was something softer. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of a life that wasn't defined only by what he'd destroyed. In New York, one evening, Emily stood on a balcony at a corporate event, looking out at the river. The wind lifted her hair. She sipped a drink she wasn't really tasting. Inside, people networked. Deals were hinted at. Names dropped. Her phone buzzed. A news alert she might have once ignored. Local developer Thompson shifts focus to community housing projects after controversial year. She opened it. The article was short. It talked about Thompson Development's new focus on mid-income housing, about a partnership with a nonprofit, about Richard's advisory role and his public commitment to responsible growth. At the end, there was a quote from him. "We grew too fast in some ways and lost sight of who we were building for. We're trying to correct that, not with words, with projects." She read it twice. Then she closed the article, slipped the phone back into her bag, and went back inside. Someone was calling her name. A partner. A new deal. Life moved on. It always did. On a quiet Sunday 2 years after the night in the rain, Richard parked in front of the house he used to walk into without thinking. The stone walkway was the same. He wasn't. He rang the bell. Laura opened the door. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he replied. There was no awkwardness now. Or rather, there was, but it was familiar. Behind her, he could see a box of old decorations, half unpacked, Chloe's old track trophy on a shelf. A photo of Ethan at a job site, wearing a hard hat, grinning. "Come in," she said. He did. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd once spread out contracts, the same one where she'd once held the printed article with his scandal in it. "I was thinking," Laura said, wrapping her hands around a mug. "Dangerous," he said. "For me, anyway." She smiled faintly. "I don't know what the future holds," she said. "About us, about papers, about titles. I'm not promising anything." "Okay," he said. "But I was thinking," she went on, "maybe we could start spending more time in the same space. Not as husband and wife who fixed everything, just as two people who share kids and history and some part of themselves they're still figuring out." "You mean?" he asked. "I mean, maybe we stop calling it separation and start calling it—" "Trying again," she said, slowly, carefully, with full awareness of the damage behind us. His chest tightened. "You sure?" he asked. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm willing to try. Because when I picture the version of my life where I never have to see your face again, I don't like it as much as I thought I would." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "I'll take not sure but willing to try," he said. "It's better than most of what I've been offered lately." She laughed. "Don't get cocky," she said. "You're still on probation." "Understood," he replied. He looked around the kitchen. This was what was left. Not the spotless, untouchable image of a perfect family that people once envied. Not the shiny press articles about a self-made CEO. Not the electric, reckless thrill of a hotel room with a view. What was left was a smaller, imperfect, hard-earned thing. Two adult children building their own lives, carrying both the good and the bad of their parents' choices. A company that no longer pretended its founder was flawless, but still raised buildings that people lived in. A woman who had decided that her story wasn't going to be defined only by betrayal. A man who had finally, painfully, learned that wanting more without limit could cost him everything that mattered. And the possibility no guarantees that the rest of his life could be spent not chasing a new version of glory, but trying to be decent in the shadow of what he'd done. Later that day, when he left the house, it was not forever. He closed the door gently, knowing he'd be back. Not because he deserved it. Not because the story had tied itself into a neat, happy bow. But because sometimes, after the fall, what matters isn't whether you climb back to the exact same height. It's whether you learn how to walk again on ground that's no longer pretending to be perfect. That was what was left. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't clean. But it was real.